We call someone strong when they win by fighting. The more victories they rack up, the stronger we assume they are. But Sun Tzu turned that belief on its head. Winning through combat, he said, is not the highest form of victory. Even 100 battlefield wins, he argued, is a second-rate result. So, what did Sun Tzu consider the highest victory? Winning without fighting at all. Forcing your opponent to submit without ever drawing a sword. Most people, when they first hear this, tilt their head in doubt. They ask whether that is even possible in the real world. It is possible. But for those who do not understand the true nature of conflict, it will remain impossible for the rest of their lives. Why do people become obsessed with fighting? Because the outcome is visible. Win or lose, the answer comes immediately. The act of fighting itself creates a feeling that something is being done. Staying still feels unbearable. Holding your ground while an opponent pushes in makes you feel like a coward. That psychology is the most dangerous thing of all. The illusion of taking action kills judgment. The human brain is wired to react to immediate threats. When someone attacks, the instinct is to defend or strike back. Overriding that instinct and seeing the larger picture is impossible without deliberate training. Most people lose the overall game because of their desire to win the fight directly in front of them. They argue against a colleague in front of a superior because they want to win the room. They win that moment. Then, a month later, they are cut from an important project. They won the battle and lost the war. Fear operates the same way. The fear of looking weak if you hold back. The fear that one retreat means a permanent slide. That fear triggers unnecessary confrontations. People pick fights in situations that require none, and even when they win those fights, they lose something larger. Sun Tzu understood this. Those who do not calculate the cost of fighting, he believed, will ruin themselves even in victory. In the 5th century BC, King Helu of the Kingdom of Wu appointed Sun Wu as his commander. The first thing Sun Wu did before the king was not a lecture on strategy. He drafted 180 of the king's concubines for military drills. The king took it as a joke. The women laughed. Sun Wu issued a command. No one moved. Sun Wu had 2 captains executed. They were women who held the king's favor. The king tried to intervene. Sun Wu did not listen. At the next command, no one laughed. No one broke formation. This is the original model of winning without fighting. A single decisive act brought 180 people under control. The sword came out twice. The remaining 178 required no confrontation at all. The moment discipline is established, resistance disappears. This is what Sun Tzu called attacking through strategy, where calculation does the work that force would otherwise require. There is a more decisive example. Han Xian from the Chu-Han War. Han Xian did not fight often, but when he did, the enemy was already surrounded before the battle began. At the Battle of Jingxing, Han Xian set up a formation with his back to the river, a position no serious commander was supposed to take. The calculation was that soldiers with nowhere to run would have no choice but to fight with everything they had. At the same time, he watched for the moment the Zhao army emptied their main camp and sent 2,000 cavalry to seize it. The Zhao soldiers, believing they were winning, pursued Han Xian's forces and then looked back to find the Han banner planted in their own camp. The fight ended in that moment. It was not their hands that gave out. It was their will. Winning without fighting means breaking the opponent's judgment before the confrontation even begins. Here are 4 strategies you can use starting right now. First, read the board before you fight. When a demand or conflict arises, do not react immediately. Wait 48 hours. In that time, separate what the other person actually wants from what you genuinely need to gain. People who react instantly get pulled along at the other person's pace. Time is a weapon. Second, calculate the cost of the fight out loud. What do you gain if you win this? What do you lose if you do not? Even in a win, when you add up the relational cost, the time cost, and the reputational cost, the math often comes out negative. Developing the habit of doing this calculation alone eliminates half of all unnecessary conflicts. Writing it on paper makes it clearer. There is a more decisive example. Han Xian from the Chu-Han War. Han Xian did not fight often, but when he did, the enemy was already surrounded before the battle began. At the Battle of Jingxing, Han Xian set up a formation with his back to the river, a position no serious commander was supposed to take. The calculation was that soldiers with nowhere to run would have no choice but to fight with everything they had. At the same time, he watched for the moment the Zhao army emptied their main camp and sent 2,000 cavalry to seize it. The Zhao soldiers, believing they were winning, pursued Han Xian's forces and then looked back to find the Han banner planted in their own camp. The fight ended in that moment. It was not their hands that gave out. It was their will. Winning without fighting means breaking the opponent's judgment before the confrontation even begins. Third, build a position where you do not need to fight in the first place. At work, secure at least one role that cannot be replaced by anyone else. When you hold that role, many conflicts pass around you on their own. In business, stake out a customer base or service approach that is difficult for competitors to enter. Position protects you. You stop needing to fight every day. Fourth, design a structure that causes the other person to back down on their own. Instead of making direct demands or refusals, quietly build conditions where their demands simply do not work. Your schedule is always full, or the decision-making structure means they cannot bypass you, or they begin to sense that pressing you too hard will cost them more than it is worth. Inside that structure, they adjust their approach on their own. Winning 100 battles in 100 tries is not the highest form of excellence. Forcing your opponent to submit without fighting is. When you first read this passage, it sounds like a polished saying, but apply it to daily life, and it cuts like a blade. Winning through fighting has a cost. Physical energy, time, relationships, emotional weight. All of it gets consumed. The person who fights and wins every time ends up repeating victories with nothing left to spend them on. That is not winning. That is exhaustion. What is different about the person who wins without fighting? They cause the other side to lose the will to fight. There is a sense that even though they are strong, they have no intention of entering a fight. Once that impression takes hold, most opponents back away on their own. This is what Sun Tzu called presence, the idea that your stance alone, without any actual combat, dismantles the opponent's desire to engage. A mountain does not move, and yet no one challenges a mountain. In modern life, what does this look like? Being someone who does not get rattled, not reacting when provoked, making the other person feel that attacking you is pointless. When that impression accumulates, conflict stops arriving. You are already winning without ever having to fight. The real weight of this idea does not land right away. That choosing not to fight comes not from weakness, but from greater strength. The weak cannot afford not to fight. There is always the fear that one retreat means it is over. The strong do not need to fight. They already know the situation will move in their favor without it. This is not about avoiding conflict. It is about building a state where conflict becomes unnecessary. Building that state is strategy. Making that strategy a part of how you move through the world is discipline. In the next episode, we go into what Sun Tzu called knowing your enemy and knowing yourself. Why understanding the other side and understanding yourself are actually one and the same problem, and why most people get both of them wrong.